Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. So glad everybody can be with us this evening. Lots to get to. And Kevin, did you ever play flag football in gym class or when you were a young man, around a keg? Did you play
Yeah,
flag football?
yeah, fraternity league. We had flag league, all that stuff. Yeah, definitely played it.
Yeah, and he definitely had a pull hamstring. I'm sure Angel probably knows about that. These young guys pulling hamstrings and all that. But Kevin, the reason I bring that up is flag football. It's all the big rage around, PIAA, which is our high school association in Pennsylvania, and now around the country. The NFL announced today there's going to be a professional flag football. And they got some heavy investors in this. Tomorrow Sports and world-class investors. They're going to have a men's and a women's league. They're putting some money into this. Is this feasible?
No, it's not. You can't get a European football league to work. You can't get the lingerie bowl league, whatever that is, to work. But now let's try to throw some more money into flag football. It's preposterous, man. But whatever. Not my money. Don't care what I watch it on TV. Yeah, put it on DraftKings. I'll give it a look.
There it is. And the G word, if people putting some cake on something and have some fantasy football possibilities in it, yeah, some people will put some money on it. And the crazy thing is, Kevin, it's the rage around football, because a lot of people are worried about CTE and contact and et cetera. But I just, the NFL's just so entrenched, at Friday night, high school football, and then Saturday you got major college football, and then Sunday you have the NFL typically. So is there going to be enough eyeballs, and will ESPN and some of the other networks bid to put this on?
Once again, when I was watching the Ocho and they had kickball on followed by pillow fighting in a ring, hand on Bible, pillow fighting. Yeah, you can make flag football work on ESPN. You can sit there, but put it like on Tuesday night or Wednesday night so it's not going against anything. Yeah, people will tune in.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I immediately think of Dodgeball, the movie, and Patches O'Houlihan. I think that's what his name was. And, Vince Vaughn and they're throwing dodgeballs at each other, and it was put on TV, so people will watch that. So there was a joke in the movie, but you're so true. They need programming, and I have been watching some of the UFL. I watched some of the games, and there are some players in the league, guys like John Ross and DTR, who used to be on the Eagles and the Browns, playing in the league. So there are some names, and the football wasn't that bad, but in terms of flag football, I talked with Javon about this last week and want to get your take on it. They had the big, it was what I think they were calling it the Fanatics Flag Football Challenge. It was out in L.A., and they had a lot of former players and some current guys. Tom Brady was out there, and it was really a big selling point in terms of they're getting everybody ready for flag football is going to be in the Olympics. Olympics, I think it's 2028. In Los Angeles, it's going to be there. And, is this a big American football? I always talk to a lot of people that aren't originally from the United States, and some of them just don't get the concept of American football and some of our sports. Is it going to be sellable to some of these other countries around, flag football?
It hasn't so far. Any time they've tried something in Europe or overseas anywhere, it hasn't taken off. But once again, you get it put in the Olympics. It's saying, all right, let's try to get the United States to go push football in there. I mean, who's going to be good in that? Canada? When they had the World League team, there wasn't there like 6 or 8 teams, and like 4 of them were in Germany or something like that. So I don't know if the other countries are really going to be behind it, but we'll see.
Yeah, and in other countries, they're into football, their version of football, which we call soccer, and they always, a lot of expats, they always said, oh, the Americans bastardized it. They took the name of football, and this isn't football. It's more like rugby, but it's an American obsession. And as you said, I think the presence that the NFL is doing with these international games is bringing it to the masses around the world, and it's just, though, I just think a lot of people aren't growing up with it over there, and they're more used to playing soccer and tennis and games, cricket, games that are more um, from their countries. So but I think this one sport that's from America that has moved all over the world, and we're seeing this, is basketball. That's why you're seeing such a presence of so many non-American born players dominating in the NBA, and I just don't know if there's a space for that in terms of football.
It's going to be tough. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the United States version of football and the size of the people that are playing those games with the agility that they have, are they going to have that in other countries where they didn't grow up on this? So you're going to grab some 300-pound guy or something like that, trying to move, or you get somebody who's fast and he's not going to be able to catch a ball. They don't have sports like that where you catch a ball like 40 yards downfield. So it's definitely going to be a learning curve for other countries.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill set that is commensurate to the United States, and they're teaching these young men that play football in terms of NFL. They're playing football starting probably at the age of 6, 7. I think in terms of flag football, I do think that it's good that younger kids are playing flag football and they learn the game, and they're not experienced the hitting. You know what I mean? My younger son played flag football for years, and I coached, and it just gave a lot of kids that probably would shy away from contact, the ability to play. So we'll see how that's going. And getting back to flag football, there was USA team beat up on the former pros and current pros. You had Joe Burrow out there, you had Tom Brady, Jaden Daniels. They beat him in both situations. It was a round-robin tournament. In the finals, Team USA beat Tom Brady and Hurts' team 24-14. But it's 5-on-5, and it's different rules. You know what I mean? I just think Brady and those guys went out there. It was fun to them. You know what I mean? It was like, all right, we'll try something new. But they weren't practicing. And Team USA, these guys, flag football is their life.
Well, yeah, it's one of the things, though. I mean, give me a moment to be on my soapbox here, just a moment. I find it so stupid that you have guys that have a history of injury in Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, and I want them out there playing flag football. If you remember the Teddy Bridgewater injury when he was at Minnesota, it was during training camp, and he's just basically jogging by himself and blow his ACL out. I don't need these high-priced guys, if I'm their fan base, out there playing flag football.
I agree with you, and it's interesting. They probably had to get permission from their respective clubs, and the owners had to be holding their breath. And a couple of the players have really said they're interested in playing in the Olympics in 2028 in Los Angeles. Joe Burrow, in particularly, Justin Jefferson has said maybe he wants to be out there, but I just feel like, what's the point? I mean, they're not getting paid. Team USA, you have these guys like Darryl House, Doucette the third, who was the MVP of the game I was talking about. It's their life. It's 5-on-5. It's different rules, and I just feel like, at the end of the day, these guys are millionaires in the NFL, and they probably are like, nah. It's just not that serious to them, and not worth the chance of getting hurt. We all remember Robert Edwards getting hurt at that Pro Bowl in that beach football game where his career just was never the same. And it's just like, why take the risk? So good for Team USA that they won that, and that flag football is exploding. We'll see how its survival rate. We've seen so many leagues come and go. I watched a great documentary just recently on the ABA, with Dr. J and all those guys in the 70s. It was on Prime, and its time and place. It lasted 5 years, but it's just so hard to compete against these majors, in terms of they have the TV contracts, they have the facilities, they have the fan base. As you said, they have the betting community knows all about them, so the NFL, it's just handmade ready for them. And we'll see if flag football is able to do this, but I kind of am skeptical. Javon and I talked last week about the UFL and how they have a new person, Rapone, involved, and he's really made some changes in terms of putting in smaller venues and just making sure they have more eyeballs and the team's skill is more consistency. So I do think there is a world where spring football can thrive, but they're going to have to align themselves with the NFL and kind of make it like a farm system.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what we've talked about before. It's almost like their own little G League level, like the NBA has,
Right.
kind of, do that. By the way, that documentary about the ABA, Soul Power, good watch, definitely
Yeah.
a good watch.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's a great watch.
yeah. Anybody who's watching, listening right now, check it out. But the NFL, I mean, they're almost their own worst enemy because their product is so huge right now that the best players are there. You have the best players in the NFL, in the world, playing in the NFL, I should say. So any league that comes under it, unless you have a mind that it's minor league version of this sport, if you're expecting to see what you see on Sundays in the wintertime, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. And a big thing in terms of these new leagues is officiating. And Kevin, I want to get your take on it. There's a stormer brewing, man. In the NFL is set to hire 150 to 180 replacement referees and prep them for the 2026 season. These guys will be from Division One, Division Two, Division Three, and I don't remember what year it was, but there was a debacle. I think it was in Seattle where the ball was laying on the ground. They called it a touchdown. It's on Monday Night Football. Everyone saw it, and these replacement referees, they were gone in next week. So are we looking at the same type of situation?
I think it was 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and I think that game was Seattle and Green Bay. For some reason, it sticks in my head. But yeah, I mean, first of all, can the officiating get much worse? It's really been bad. They've been poor at their job now for a long time, and the thing is, their saving grace could be the replacement officials coming in and being as bad as they were in 2012. And if they're not, then they've really painted themselves in a corner on this one.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because we all remember that, and the speed of the game is just so incredible in terms of the professional level. I've attended a lot of high school games and Nate's Division III games, and it's just so much these guys at the lower levels are going to miss naturally, and then you move to the higher level, these guys are moving so fast, and it's just gonna be it's going to be mayhem out there, and with the replays, everybody's going to be like, I saw it. They screwed that up, and it's just too much money at hand, in terms of the gambling, in terms of TV rights and all that. So hopefully they sort this thing out with the officials because it could become one big headache. And it was crazy in 2012, after that Monday night game debacle I was talking about, they cleaned everything up and they said, all right, give them their money. And the NFL's got money. We just talk about the salary cap is up to $300 million per team. Revenue's still climbing. So take care of the referees. None of us like them, but they're doing their job. And I say make them full-time employees, Kevin. I mean, make them go to school, make them get sharper. I always said these guys being part-time, that's a big problem in terms of them in their preparation for these games.
I absolutely agree with you entirely. For the fact you just said, it's like the money that the NFL generates, you can't put money aside to make these guys just full-time. This is their only job. It's not some side hustle. I want you concentrating on this job 12 months a year. They don't have the cash to do that, and that's a bad look on them. That's like saying, give them a couple months. We'll give them some training camp games. They'll be fine. It's like, nah, 12 months a year, man. This is their gig. That's it.
Yeah, and baseball, there's a lot wrong with baseball, but they seem to get it right. They have their officials be full-time, and their union's pretty strong. The fun part, I want to get your take on this, there's a lot of challenging going on in baseball. Just the other day with the Reds, I think there were 8 challenges, and 6 of them went against the umpire, and then the umpire had some animosity. Could you imagine if that was in football, if the coaches had that many challenges?
I tell you what, they botched this. Watch what happens. They're going to all right, you're going to give us these officials, these part-time guys. It's like, no, I need more challenges. Could happen.
It is. And I can see a guy like the Harbaughs, Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, chasing after a rep, yelling at him. And it's just they need to fix this situation before it gets worse. They have plenty of time. We'll talk about the draft soon. The draft will be April 23rd, 25th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, this is kind of a downtime for the league. They're having their league meetings right now, but this gives them a chance to clean some things up. Speaking of cleaning things up, at the spring meetings around the NFL, the Browns' proposal to be able to trade picks 5 years out in the future, they pulled it off the table basically because they knew it wasn't going to be passed. What do you think about teams mortgaging their future, their 5 years worth of picks to get some stud to come to their team?
The NBA does it. The NBA has stuff sprinkled all, down the road. And I think with the NFL, it's just a year-to-year league. It's hard to do that, to sit there and give, say, 8 years from now, I'm giving you this pick right here. And it's like, who knows what's going to be what in that amount of time? More than any other sport, I think the NFL is more year-to-year, and they just change who they are.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And there are not a lot of rules coming through. Rich McKay from the Falcons, he's part of that whole rules process. He has said a lot of rules this time have not come through. We all know the push is going to keep living. And the interesting is the UFL banned it, and it was kind of a story. But I just think the NFL's like, all right, teams are going to have to figure this thing out, kind of like with the Wildcat. And, when that was the novelty out there, and they'll just go from there. So, they'll have their owners' meetings. We'll see, and then we'll start moving towards the draft. A proposal that's not on the table but seems to be coming up in conversation at the spring meetings. Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, said he would be for an 18-game schedule. He said there are a couple caveats, though. He said they would need to remove a preseason game so there will only be 2 instead of 3. He said add a second week of buys, and all 32 teams should have an international game. So would that help you sway in terms of having 18 games scheduled? I just don't know if it's feasible. We talk about the number of injuries. It's a mass unit. A lot of these teams, that's why they don't have fantasy football in week 17, 18, because a lot of these guys are practice squad players, and the games, they're not meaningless, but a lot of times everything's wrapped up by now.
It's just the inevitable greed of the NFL. We know they're going to 18 games. It's how they set it up for them to play 18 games. International, everyone has to play international. That's going to be kind of tough, but all right. You know why he's putting that? So they can get more money for international games as well. They're all greedy. They all want the 18 games. They don't care about the preseason garbage because the season ticket holders don't even want to go to the preseason games. They usually give those away after the first one. But at the end of the day, it comes to the fact that these guys can't stay on the field for 18 games. You need a number 2 quarterback that can carry the load for 2 to 3 games at least. So it's going to happen, but they don't have it set up the right way definitely yet.
Yeah, and they're going to have to incentivize the players. I think the collective bargaining agreement is up around 2030. So it's a situation where it's like, okay, they may need to change some things. That collective bargaining brings some more revenue to the tables, gives more to the pension fund, the guys when they retire, something to incentivize these guys to play the 18th game. And if the players are smart, they will hold that over the owner's head, just not accept, status quo. A lot of these guys are not prepared to sit out, regular season games and forego their paychecks. So that's going to be interesting in terms of collective bargaining agreement. We saw it back in the day, 1987. There was 3 games, regular season games that were lost, and it can happen. So hopefully there'll be labor peace. And as you said, the NFL's a golden goose. So try to keep it alive, whether it's the officials, whether it's the 18th game. Just try to keep everything rolling on because it's just such a machine. Because when you watch these other sports, NFL is America's obsession. I've been watching some of the NCAA tournament. I'll get your take on that, but nothing replaces football.
Yeah, you said it correctly. It's the golden goose right there. It's the one that you can put it on any day of the week. You can put on the 2 worst teams playing each other. People will tune in to watch. So that's what they have going for it. The fact that they play, less games than any other sport, also out of the 4 major ones, I mean, it makes it more must-watch TV than say like 82 games in an NBA, NHL season, 162 in a baseball season. You got 17 games. It's like, man, I got to pay attention to this, and they have people's attention on that.
Yeah, and every game counts, and eyeballs are glued from the end of July to his preseason games all the way through the Super Bowl in February. So, and then after that, it's downtime. So that's why I think there could be a market for some, minor league football during that time, because people will watch it, and it just seems the younger generation. I talk to my sons about this all the time. One's a teenager, and one's a 20. Baseball's just not it. It just seems like it's too slow to the younger generation. You and when I grew up, Little League was everything. That's all you wanted to play. But now you have lacrosse. You got, there's track. There's all-season basketball. And 7-on-7 football is really starting to take a hold in terms of young folks that they're playing. It's almost become like AAU, where you have travel teams for 7-on-7 football.
Yeah, I think it also goes to the Gen Z and the generation for them. What was that, Y or whatever it was? You have these tablet kids who need something constantly happening. You make them watch a baseball game, their head's about to explode. It's like their eyes are rolling back in their head. They're so bored. So, yeah, that's just more, you have to play to the masses. And that's where I think baseball, when they start speeding up the pitch clock and everything else and speeding up the game time, it's like, all right, we're losing these young kids. But all the kids want to play football still. All the kids love play Madden. So, I mean, they're tapped into that.
Yeah, and in terms of video games, I think they did try to redo MLB The Show. I think that's the game to try to make the game more exciting and have I always call it the walk down the street test. Like, if you have the most, famous baseball players walking down the street, would people really know who they are? You know what I mean? Whereas Tom Brady or somebody, Patrick Mahomes, walking down the street, everybody knows who they are. Like, oh man, that's who they are. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see how this generation, or they continue growing the football fan base, or they're going to go to other sports. But I just think football's not going anywhere. And let's get back to on the field here, Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9. The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. Thanks for joining with us. I'm going to go to your favorite team, Cleveland. Back in the news. There's a couple stories coming out of Cleveland. I'll start with this one, since you're such a big fan. Shedeur Sanders acquiescing to number 12. He's going back to his number 2. It's in the Raptors at Colorado. I don't know why, but he's going back to number 2 with the Browns. Is that going to be a big deal?
Absolutely not. You just got a bunch of young kids now buying another jersey. That's all it is. It's a money push. Nobody cares, man. But Shedeur Sanders, if you think that's going to change your luck, so be it, man. Good luck with it. But it's not going to change the talent level, that's for sure.
Yeah, the Browns, as we all know, they're deficient. They're going to be picking in terms of the draft. They'll be picking in they're at number 6. Finished 5-12 last year, and everybody was talking about Shedeur and all that. But in the end, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. If you think the number is going to help you, fine.
He's a Pro Bowler. He's a Pro Bowler. Come on.
Pro Bowl replacement. He got to play in their version of their flag game and their kickball and dodgeball, whatever they're doing now, instead of playing the game. And, more power to him for going, and getting to play in that. But, we'll see how this helps him. I think he's got to engage himself with Todd Monken, the new head coach there, and I just don't know if they're ever going to change their fortunes. It's like at certain teams you can write them in pen every season. The Jets, the Browns, they're going to stink. So until they don't, I'm going to say they're not going to do very well. But also the other big news out of Cleveland is, and this is for all the money. Deshaun Watson, who they're giving $63 million or so, $46 million guaranteed this season. He's been named the pole position leader to be the starter for the 2026 Browns. I'm sure Sanders and Dylan Gabriel are like, what? I don't get a chance? But what do you think in terms of Deshaun Watson? Can he ever get back to that 2020 form when he was, almost MVP type candidate, where he led the NFL in yards and I think touchdowns?
Absolutely not. He will never play at that level again. I will stand on this hill. He's got to go out there. Once again, worst contract, probably worst trade and everything included in NFL history. That's what it's going to go down as. So if he can get on the field, yeah, get on the field. Try to earn some of this money. Try to take some of this poor limelight of shine off this franchise for the move that we made. I think I saw, since he's been with the Cleveland Browns, he's played in 19 games. The amount of money that man is in 19 games is absurd. So yeah, if he can walk on the field, he's starting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because David Njoku's going. He's a free agent. They do have Harold Fannin that looked very good, rookie tight end last year. So fantasy-wise, pick him up, everybody out there. Running back, that's going to be a position they're going to need to address in the draft. They do have Jerry Jeudy, but not much else in terms of talent around Deshaun Watson. I think, yeah, it's going to be another long season, and we'll talk in a minute about that 2027 class. But I think they're one of the teams looking forward to that draft next year where you're going to have so much talent. So speaking of another team that want to get your take on, same division, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Rodgers, 42 years old, kind of holding them hostage. He did throw 27 touchdowns last year. But he's talking about he's coming back and he's seeking a contract more like $30 million instead of $13 million they paid him in 2025. I just don't know he has a desire to play in a National Football League. The Steelers did make the playoffs. You know, Mike Tomlin never had a losing season, but now McCarthy's there. And I'm not sure if they get along with each other after the end of their Packers time together. But what do you see for the Steelers in 2025?
I tell you what, the desire that Aaron Rodgers does have, he has a desire to get another fat check. That's what he's got the desire for. I'm sure we'll get into it later about free agency and the moves that teams made. I thought Pittsburgh had a good offseason. I thought they added some guys, that can help out. You got Pittman now to go with Metcalf. Was it Dowdle also went there as well, I believe?
Correct.
Because Kenny Gainwell's gone. So, I mean, they have some pieces there. They have an older defensive unit, though, that's for sure. I think it's like you need a quarterback to win in this league. And if you're depending on a guy in his 40s, you got bigger problems.
Yeah, and he's checked down Charlie. They did bring in Michael Pittman coming over from the Colts. That was a big move. They got him to pair with DK Metcalf. And they do have some pieces there with Freiermuth at the tight end position. Still trying to tinker with that offensive line with Broderick Jones and some of those guys there. But it's just he looks so bad in that playoff game, where he had a pick six. He also had a fumble return for a touchdown and just looked frazzled in the game. So, as you said, a lot of these guys, they just don't know when to say when. I thought Rodgers would be that guy to say, oh, I'm done. I want to walk off, but he's a lot like who he was mentored by. He seems like he's like Brett Favre, who just his elbow basically fell apart, and then he knew it was time and he was done. So, we'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. I've said that he's going to retire, but now you talk about money, Kevin. Yeah, maybe he does come back. And the key thing is the Rooney family and Omar Khan, the GM there, they seem to want him back. So, I don't know why. He's going to be 43 in December, and it's a younger man's game. But then you have Mason Rudolph, you have Will Howard there. There's just not a lot in the cupboard. Maybe they're another one trying to prepare for that 2027 draft. But, and good segue there. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Thanks for joining us. All season, you said it, and I told Kevin, study up on this. Let's talk about some of the moves. Let's talk about moves first, and we'll talk about teams. Like, what players do you think put themselves in a good situation going into 2026? I'll throw one in just to start. I really think KC's signing of Kenneth Walker to a 3-year, $45 million, $28.7 million guarantee contract is a great situation for Walker. He's going into KC. They needed a running back. Mahomes is going to be coming back, and I think he's setting himself up well.
Yeah, I thought that was great for Kansas City, and I thought it was great for Walker. I mean, he's going to get to a situation where he's not having to be pulled off the field once they get in the red zone, like Seattle would do when Charbonnet would come into the game. You know, it's like, all right, I'm going to get you all the way down here, but all right, go stand on the sideline and watch this guy run it in for 2 yards. So I think that was a good move for Walker. He got paid. Kansas City upgraded at running back. So that worked out well. I think the Raiders going out and getting a center for their future quarterback, I thought that was huge from the Ravens. So I don't want to butcher the name, but you can say it better than I can.
Tyler Linderbaum.
There it is.
You know, he's one of my wrestling guys. He was former state champion wrestler out of Iowa, and he was with the Ravens. And, yeah, he's a cornerstone piece for the Raiders. You know, 3 years, $81 million. I think it may be all guaranteed, the most for any interior offensive lineman. He's a cornerstone for them. And as you said, they've really started to rebuild for the Raiders. So, yeah, we can talk about some of the other Raiders' other moves in a minute. But I thought that was a good move for him. I'll tell you a player that landed a good spot. And this wasn't free agent signing. It was a trade. I think Houston bringing in David Montgomery over from the Lions, they needed a running back bad. You know, I just think the running back position was unsettled for them last year. They had Woody Marks there. He played pretty well for a rookie, but they just, you know, could never get it going. And they need somebody to help C.J. Stroud. He looks lost, number one, and maybe a running game could help him.
Yeah, they definitely did, because you sat there. They took Nick Chubb on the cheap. You sat there. Joe Mixon looks like he might be spent. He might be done. Woody Marks, he was a rookie. He looked like a rookie for majority of the season, but he shows promise, you know. So you bring a veteran in like Montgomery, now you have someone to bridge maybe the gap a little bit. So, yeah, in Houston, that defense and everything else, if C.J. Stroud could play just a little more competently than he played in the back end of last season, I mean, they could do something. But it's like it all depends on C.J. Stroud at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's a good move for them. And they're a consistently winning team. They have the defense, Will Anderson Jr. and that group over there. So if they have a running game, I'm sure D'Amico Ryans is going to build around that. You know, Nick Casario, their GM, and they'll stick with that because, as you said, Stroud struggling with consistency, not getting the ball to Nico Collins. You know, I know fantasy owners out there everywhere. Nate had him this year. He was just like, oh, my God. You know, Stroud can't get Collins a ball. It's just like, what's going on here? So, you know, we'll see how they bounce back. Maybe they'll get Tank Dell back. A lot of people said he was the key piece for them. He had that bad leg injury from 2024. But I do like Montgomery there. Quarterbacks. These are marquee ones. I thought San Francisco was smart. They put Mac Jones sort of out there on the market, and they said, nah, let's bring him back because, as we said, no quarterback seems to stay healthy all 17 games anymore, and Mac Jones is a guy that can come in there, lead his team. He actually, I think, played probably better than Brock Purdy last season.
Ooh, bold statement from Lloyd on that one. Yeah, I tell you what, I thought he was done, man, and he came in there and he played well. He was more than competent. Imagine if Houston would have had Mac Jones last year instead of C.J. Stroud. You know, I mean, it would have been a better chance for him. So San Fran doing that, bringing him in, that was a good move. And then, of course, with Mike Evans, and, you know, they made some moves as well with that. But, yeah, Mac Jones, that was a big move for them coming back.
Yes. And then in terms of best all seasons, Kevin, we'll jump to that. You know, this offseason, you can't talk about success without the Rams. I mean, the Rams were right. They played in the NFC Championship game. I felt like they reloaded, and they're going to be a tough out coming up in 2026 season. They traded for Kansas City corner Trent McDuffie for a first-round pick, and then they gave him a 4-year extension. They signed his partner, Justin Watson, also used to be with Kansas City, 3-year deal. They re-signed Cam Curl. They kept Stafford. McVay's back, Snead, you know, so they have the coach, quarterback, GM combination coming back. And then most importantly, they got a long snapper, Joe Cardona, and a new special teams coach in Bubba Ventrone coming over. So they're trying to fix that area. That was just awful for them. So I thought the Rams had a really good offseason. And they're going to have the number 13 pick because Atlanta, they traded up last year, and now the Rams benefit from that.
Yeah, the Rams, I think they definitely, with the secondary, they made great moves there. I still think, even before going into last season, You have Stafford, who's going to be a year older, Devontae Adams, who's also going to be a year older, and you guys make Puka Nacua stop biting people and everything else, whatever the hell he's doing these days. So if they can control that part of the team, I mean, the defensive moves are really good.
Yeah, and speaking of Puka Nacua, it's coming out that he's probably going to get a $43 million per year contract. That would be higher than JSN. But as Kevin said, what is going on with Puka? Is he a knucklehead or
Oh yeah.
he can't handle a sauce? I mean, what is going? I saw him at a UFC fight and he looked a little banged up at that. It's just like, hey man, don't piss this thing away because it can happen. We've seen a lot of athletes who, they've had their downfall from a lot of things, whether it's drugs, women, the money, alcohol. So what's going on with Puka, and can he turn this thing around?
He's a young, famous, rich athlete who lives in Los Angeles. There is temptation everywhere out there. Who's to say that neither one of us, you put me in that situation, I might bite somebody. I don't know. I'm not hanging in those circles. So at the same time, you need the right people around you to keep you out of that stuff. And that's why I think the Rams have to get somebody that's like, all right, get a veteran, somebody. It's like, all right, Puka, you're with him. Room together, do whatever. But they need to look after that guy, especially if they're going to spend that kind of money.
Yeah, and it was interesting because one of the former players, T.J. Hushmanzada, was saying, get him, hire security, $1,000 guy to go everywhere with him. And you and I remember, we're right around the same age as him. Charles Barkley, he was a man of the people. I used to hang out with him all the time. You know what I mean? He was one of those guys. He would be out, and about, and he got himself in some situations because, let's face it, people don't like celebrities. They're jealous, and it leads to, you need to get the hell away from them. You know what I mean? Let somebody else handle these types of situations. So hopefully Puka finds some security or some common sense, because $43 million a year, I mean, that contract may be a $200 million contract. I know that the Rams are like, all right, get your shit together, man. Yeah, so we'll see with Puka. I know McVay's probably talked to him, GM Les Snead, and the ownership group there for the Rams. But yeah, it's just like, all right, if you want this extension, you got to do the right things, because it can go away very quickly. Just go ask Johnny Manziel.
Facts.
Yep. So any other teams, Kevin, you think had a very good or winning the all season? I have a couple other ones I can throw in there, but wanted to get your take on this.
I think Carolina did a decent job. I do. I think they upgraded a little bit. They had they had a surprising season last year. Do I think they spent too much money? Yes, but once again, not my money. So, but did they upgrade their team as being the question? Yeah, I think Carolina actually did an okay job.
Yeah, and they brought Jalen Phillips was their cornerstone piece that they brought in for the Panthers, and they're what did you think of them trading? Well, actually, he was a Chicago Bear now, but what do you think about DJ Moore going to the Bills? Is that a big move? Because I think the Bills had a pretty good off season too. I was talking to Nate about that. They did lose some pieces, but what do you think about DJ Moore going from the Bears to the Bills?
I think it could only help Buffalo out to add another competent wide receiver. Now, is DJ Moore going to be the needle shifter to get Buffalo to a Super Bowl? I don't think so. Some of the reports I've been reading about early mock drafts and everything else is Buffalo may be taking a wide receiver, either the first, second, third round, somebody that can pop in, because Keon Coleman's looking like a bust. Like, he'll have his one good game, and you won't see that guy for like 8 weeks. So it's like, I think they're getting to the point where it's like they have to bring somebody else in.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the Panthers real quick. They got Jalen Phillips, they got Aka Eleb, a cornerback, Evans, a cornerback coming over on a 1-year deal. J.J. Jansen. They also try to fix their lawn snap position, and they just try to, they're going to build around Tedero McMillan, Bryce Young. So they do have some young pieces there. And as always, that division, NFC South is there for the taking. They won it last year at 8-9. So, we'll see how they do. But, yeah, the Bills, they made some moves, and I was saying to Nate, the window may be closing for Josh Allen. He was getting to 30 years old. How much longer are they going to get close? Yes, they made some moves, and last year Mahomes wasn't there. Lamar Jackson was in the playoffs. I thought this was their chance, but they didn't win the division. So they made some changes in terms of getting rid of Sean McDermott. Brandon Beane, the GM, got to say, so they bring in Shane Buechele, a backup quarterback. DJ Moore, who I was talking about, they trade him from the Bears for a fifth rounder, and they exchanged second rounders in that deal. So that was pretty, not a huge asking price to get DJ Moore. I think he's a good, solid piece with Shakir. But as you were saying, are they number one receivers? And Josh Allen may need some more there. They do have a very good running back position, though, with Cook, who led the NFL in rushing. Connor McGovern, their center, they brought him back. 4 years, $52 million, 32 guaranteed. Sam Franklin, they re-signed him. One of their safeties, they brought in Geno Stone, another safety. And then they also re-signed Hamlin today. So did they do enough for the Bills?
No, not yet. Not yet at all. Until they get that number one wide receiver, I'm going to say no, they haven't done enough. The thing is now, it's become more parallel. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, rather, are on the same clock. They're two guys who have the hardware already. They have the accolades. They've made some money. They need, for their legacy, to at least get to a Super Bowl, if not win one. Both those guys are staring down the other side of the career now. The early part of their career is over. It's like, I need to get at least to the Super Bowl to, legitimize my career.
And a team, on the other end of the spectrum, had a bad offseason. You got to say the Miami Dolphins. Everybody was like, oh, they made a big splash signing Malik Willis to a 3-year, $67.5 million deal, $45 million guaranteed. They bring him in. Well, guess what? Sorry, Malik. You get the bag, but there's no one around you. They trade Waddle. They trade him to the Denver Broncos. And I'll just flat out ask you, are the Miami Dolphins tanking? I mean, what are they doing?
Oh, my God, they're tanking. Yes, they are. They have no desire to win. And once again, I've brought it up before. I'll bring it in. What tells me that a team doesn't want to win? Let's bring in Kevin Patullo. Let's bring him in. He's going to be the difference maker there. It's like, you know what? I've got to make sure that we really tank. Yeah, give me that guy from Philadelphia who didn't do anything. Bring him down here. So, yeah, Miami, they spent money on Malik Willis. They had to spend money on somebody to play quarterback and take hits. Good for Malik Willis's wallet, bad for his back and everything else this year he's going to endure.
Yeah, and so Miami has 11th overall pick in the first round, and then they have the 30th overall pick, the Denver Broncos pick. But they have a new GM in Sullivan coming in there. They fired Chris Greer, and it's just like, yeah, I just don't know what they're playing or rhyme or reason with Stephen Ross, the owner, is doing here. But Kevin, you just think, okay, when you look at the Jets, you look at the Dolphins, they're planning for 2027. Arch Manning coming out, Trinidad Chambliss, Dante Moore, Julian Saint, C.J. Carr. I mean, these are all the star quarterbacks. And then you have the receivers, Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, the receiver factory, it seems lately, Ryan Williams from Alabama, and there's a ton of other talent at wide receiver and some of the other value positions like edge rusher. So, it's as you were saying, it's hard to tank an NFL. You're going to luck into 4 wins, it seems like. But, some of these teams, they're trending towards like 3 or less wins. And I think it's, the Dolphins and the Jets are leading the way.
Yeah, I think the NFL, it's going to be one of those things. They're going to have to address this probably if it keeps going this way, maybe a couple years down the road, like the NBA is now. They're like resetting their tank rules and everything else, So I think they need to right the ship before it gets wrong. If you see teams a year in advance trying to just blow a season, it's like, what are we doing here? So I think it's something they definitely have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and talking about a team that they did bad, but they're trying to turn it around. The Oakland Raiders, they got a new GM in there in Spytech, and then they have Clint Kubiak taking over as the head coach. But the Raiders, they seem to be trending in the right direction. You talk about Tyler Linderbaum going there at center position. They're picking number 1 Fernando Mendoza, quarterback, and he's a prohibitive favorite. Mendoza's already started working with Brian Greasy, who's on the Raiders staff in terms of looking at the playbook. So what do you think about the Raiders? And is Fernando Mendoza, is he going to be the real deal?
I like everything the Raiders have done, to be honest, so far, and they really would have been set if that Crosby trade would have went through. Getting 2 first-round picks from really would have helped. Now, the other question is Mendoza, is he the real deal? He's the best quarterback in a weak quarterback class. I mean, he won in college, so, I mean, you got to see how it translates to the NFL game, how that works. But the jury's out with me on Mendoza still to see how his game's going to fit into the NFL.
Yeah, Mendoza has his size. He's 6'5", 225. As you said, national championship quarterback last year for the University of Indiana. Came from Cal, where he wasn't that great, but you start wondering, was he the prettiest guy out there in an ugly class? We're going to see how he does, and in terms of the NFL. Do you think there'll be any other quarterbacks drafted in the first round? Everybody's talking about Ty Simpson from Alabama, who I watched a lot of in terms of college, and I wasn't really impressed. But, they're talking about maybe a team may jump up. They always that guy, they're going to jump up and grab him. I mean, do you think that's a wise decision to jump up and grab Ty Simpson from Alabama first round?
I think it's fool's gold. But then again, you see these GMs, I mean, their job is hinging year to year, and it's like, man, I need to get a quarterback. I need to get some. The panic sets in. It's real. So, I mean, I could see Simpson going to the Jets maybe in the second round, but I wouldn't rule out somebody jumping up at the back end of that first round and trying to take him. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, and we've seen it before. Think of Denver jumping up to grab Tim Tebow way too earlier than his talent. Everybody said, he's maybe a fourth, fifth round quarterback, and they said, oh no, he's our guy. And as you said, once these coaching staffs get enamored with a guy, they got to have him. They got their shiny new toy. Jake Locker going to the Tennessee Titans and just couldn't get it done. We saw Zach Wilson recently signed somewhere, and he was the number 3 overall pick with the Jets, and just if I'm a coach, unless a guy is a prohibitive, can't miss, I'm not investing in terms of picking up a quarterback in the first round, especially this draft. I mean, there's so many good edge rushers, there's so many good offensive linemen, a couple good receivers out there. Why not go there rather than reach for a quarterback who, if the coach makes a wrong decision, he's probably not going to be there to coach the guy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I agree with you. The edge rushers are good. The wide receivers are good. There's other positions that you need help on that you, instead of reaching for a guy who, let's be honest, might be out of the league in 3 years. So, yeah, I think that it would behoove everyone to sit back and wait on a quarterback.
Yeah, and in terms of the draft, there are a couple guys I'm like, oh, I got a crush on these guys. And it's interesting. A couple of them from Ohio State, man. Arvell Reese from Ohio State. He's an edge rusher. Talking about maybe go number 2 overall, maybe to the Jets. 6'4", 238. He had 6.5 tackles last year. Sacks, last year. Explosive guy. Talk a little bit about Arvell Reese and have you watched him.
I'll tell you what, Ohio State's just becoming. They might not win a national championship, but I tell you what, their guys go to the pros, and they go high in the draft as well. A couple of the mock drafts I saw like 4 Ohio State guys go to the top 10 picks, So, I mean, Reese, yeah, he's a baller. I think he's one of those guys, I don't like to use the term can't miss, but he's pretty damn close that you can get to being a player who's going to step on the field and contribute right away.
Yeah, and he's up there, and you talk about Caleb Downs, their safety from Ohio State, 6 foot, 205. I mean, he was all over the field for them. And as you said, it was, you tip your cap to Indiana beating them, in terms of the Big Ten championship and getting to the national championship, because Iowa State had just so much talent. And Caleb Downs is one of those guys, you don't want to say can't miss, and they're comparing him a lot to Ed Reed in terms of he can read, he can cover, he's fast to the ball. We'll see. I always hate to do these comps, these guys coming out, but he looks like, as you said, can't misses can't be, and watch, he'll probably stink, and we'll be saying, oh,
Oh, yeah.
man, what were we thinking?
Oh, yeah, it reminds me of Deion Jordan coming out of Oregon. And the best thing that ever happened was the fact that the Miami Dolphins drafted him when Chip Kelly had the next pick for the Eagles because you knew Deion Jordan would have went to the Eagles. Instead, the Eagles get Lane Johnson to thank you, Miami. But yeah, he's one of those guys. It's like watching him in college. It's like, man, he's kind of a can't miss guy. No, he missed a lot, and that's why he was out of the league pretty quick.
Yeah, and continuing on just a couple prospects, the leading receiver seems to be Carnell Lake, also Ohio State. He's at 6'2", 190, has some good size. He went to IMG Academy. It seems to be the new high school where everybody's coming from all around the country. Averaged 17 and a half yards a catch, 9 touchdowns last year for Ohio State. They're saying he's not going to get past 7 to the Washington Commanders.
Tell you what, Washington, well, I'm sure we're going to get to it. They've had a really good offseason, and the fact that they can add somebody like that at their draft pick or their draft position, or God forbid they do something to move up, or Jeremiah Love falls to them in that spot as well, they're going to be, if Jaden Daniels stays healthy, they're looking good.
Yeah, and the thing is, they need a partner for Terry McLaurin. Whether it's a receiver or they need a running back, but I do agree with you that Washington, one of the key things they did was they got younger. They let Zach Ertz walk. They're talking about maybe Bobby Wagner. They may not re-sign him. They just got younger. And that's what it's going to take. Marshawn Lattimore, they let him go. And they're going to build with some younger pieces there. And then we'll see how, Dan Quinn does with this younger set of group. But he has a quarterback, and I think Jaden Daniels will come back after that sophomore slump.
Unless he keeps playing flag football and gets hurt. But yeah, if Jaden Daniels is healthy, I mean, yeah, they're going to be a problem in the NFC East.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And the Eagles better keep their eye on them. And the Eagles had a lot of defections this year, and they're in flux, particularly, they lost Jeff Stoutland, their offensive line coach, who seemed to be the engine for that team for such a long time. So I do think that Washington's coming along. One other prospect we'll talk about before we move on to other teams in our offseason. What do you think about Jeremiah Love? Is this, the new hysteria around running backs are back, or is he a legitimate prospect? I mean, everybody watched him on NBC playing for Notre Dame, explosive player. They're talking about a comp of maybe Saquon Barkley. Again, you got to be careful with that, but he seems to have the hands. He had 27 catches, and then he can run between the tackles too.
The one thing I'll say about him, he's fast. He's really fast. Coming in as a running back, from everything I've read and heard and seen myself, running back is probably the easiest transition for a young guy being drafted to come in and play. It's like hit a hole, go. Hit a hole, go. So, yeah, I mean, you can't coach speed, and he's got it, and he can catch the ball. So you put him in the right situation, yeah, I don't like taking running backs high, I will say that. I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, look at Genty last year, once again went into a bad situation, but it's just tough to put pressure on a running back unless you find a team that already has a passing game, a decent offensive line. So it just depends where he lands, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I think Love's going to be up there, and he will be that quarterback, running back that goes, top 10. And as you said with that position, and we heard it recently from Seattle GM John Schneider. He said, look, we'll find somebody to play in that position. You know what I mean? So you can find them later in the draft, day 2, day 3. You don't have to invest that first-round pick in them, but I think Love will be a high pick. Definitely watch for Washington. You have the Saints, possibly maybe a landing spot at 8. Obviously, KC's out of the mix at 9 now, but one of those teams in that top 10 is going to grab him. It may be the Titans at 4 because the Titans may need to get a running back. Another team, I want to get your take on this, and the Minnesota Vikings, they're picking 18. They're bringing in Kyler Murray, and he's going to go head-to-head with McCarthy, and we're going to see who's going to win that one. But what did you think about the Vikings offseason? They recently are going to announce they're going to re-sign Jordan Addison. They seem to have a lot of the pieces Do they have enough to be that team to jump into the mix back in the playoffs after missing it this year?
I tell you what, they played a lot better last year than I thought they were going to. It's like you sat there, J.J. McCarthy, once again. I think he's just that guy. He's going to be a bad first-round pick. He's battled injuries already this early in his career. I don't see that changing. Now, you have the offensive weapons there. If you can get something out of Kyler Murray, which we all know I'm not a big fan of, but that being said, bring somebody in, and for Kyler Murray to come in and maybe, reinvent himself a little bit, maybe get the quarterback whisperer there to sit there like he did with Sam Darnold, get him to straighten himself out. Tell you what, tell any quarterback, I want to put you on a team, we're going to give you Justin Jefferson. You're going to get a smile on his face, so yeah, I think it was a good form.
Yeah, and they have a tight end as well in Hawkinson. They brought Aaron Jones back. They're tinkering the offensive line. I think they had a pretty good offseason. And then they retained Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator. So Kevin O'Connell, their head coach, has got to be happy with Flores coming back. I think cornerback may be an area that they look at in the draft when they pick number 18. But, yeah, I think that they had a good offseason. And that's going to be an interesting battle because, as we said, Kyler Murray, he's on a one-year deal. 1 year, $1.3 million good deal. He's obviously being paid by the Cardinals, the majority of his contract. But I think he did have a good landing spot. Speaking of Seattle Seahawks, they've retained a lot of their guys. They did decide to let Kenneth Walker go, but do they have enough to be a viable contender to repeat next season?
On paper, sure. Yeah, they have the guys. They can sit there and make another run. Do I think it's going to happen? Rather, no, not at all. You don't see that repeat thing happen too often. And what you usually see for teams that win the Super Bowl, a lot of guys get raises. A lot of guys, most of the time, they have to leave because you can't afford, to keep them after you give somebody a raise. Now, Seattle's done a better job of keeping their team together, but it's hard to do, and that division's no pushover either. So, they got their work cut out for them.
And it's going to be interesting. They gave JSN all his money, and they made a key signing that I really like. They brought Rashid Shaheed back, who they traded for from the Saints, 3-year deal, $51 million. So they have him in the mix. They pretty much kept the offense together, and they let a couple defenders go, like Reek Woolen went to the Philadelphia Eagles, but the majority of the guys coming back for that defense. And McDonald's still there, Schneider's still there at GM spot. But as you said, it's about hunger. You know what I mean? We always say about Mickey saying to Rocky, you ain't been hungry since you won that title. So we'll see what Seattle can do. And now they're they're hunted rather than a hunter. But, yeah, I thought they had a pretty good off season. And it's good. I thought the Raiders, Tom Brady's come in there. He's put some backing into this team. As you said, Max Crosby coming back is huge for them. He had 10 sacks last season. I think they're going to make him happy. But Linderbaum, Jalen Naylor, they brought him in. Teron Johnson, cornerback Eric Stokes, defensive end Kwity Paye, Nakobe Dean from the Eagles, another linebacker, Quay Walker from the Packers. They made a lot of changes for the Raiders. Can they be this year's team that jumps from worst to playoff contention?
No. No, I literally majority of the moves that they made. I think they're doing a really good job of cleaning that up. They might happen to be in the toughest division in football, though. There's a lot of people to climb before you can make the playoffs in that division, and especially with a rookie quarterback, it's going to take a little bit of time. But at the same point, though, they're doing it right. The way they're going about this, they're making the right moves, I think.
Yeah, and I think bringing in Clint Kubiak, bringing that offensive mindset to this team. They play indoors. It's just going to be an exciting team to watch. I think Brock Bowers will get going. Hopefully I'll get him this year in fantasy and he won't get hurt. Last year I was complaining he got hurt a lot. But in that division, as you said, I think KC, you're going to have to watch for them. They have the number 9 pick and number 29 pick in the first round. We talked about Kenneth Walker coming over. They traded for your favorite quarterback, Justin Fields, to be their backup, maybe play a couple weeks. And they're just trying to get pieces around Patrick Mahomes, who's looking good in his rehab. That's what I've been hearing. And Chris Jones on defense.
Well, yeah, you sit there. I mean, these guys aren't going to be there forever. I mean, Andy, how much, Andy Reid, how many years does he have left in him? Patrick Mahomes with the wear and tear on his years does he have in him? Travis Kelsey coming back again. It's like they're trying to get that run one more time. So they're trying to get the pieces there. Henceforth, Walker coming in. So yeah, I think Kansas City come back strong this year.
Yeah, and in terms of coming back strong, and I asked Javon this last week, I asked you, Travis Kelsey, 36 years old, they give him a 3-year deal for 54.73. I mean, I guess he's the third highest paid tight end now. I guess Tay was like, oh, I'll keep playing. But, I mean, is he really worth that amount at his age?
Absolutely not. And neither was Mark Andrews of 3 years, $30-some million the Ravens gave him. There's some stupid money going to these tight ends. I mean, is it just for the fact they don't want to lose the Taylor Swift fan base? Because the Swifties buy a lot of merch. So you sit there, it's like, all right, we can overpay him there because, our sports shop, and we're going to sell a lot of Kelsey jerseys. I don't know, but yeah, that was way too much money.
Yeah, I just was like, okay, they want to bring him back, but I think that's back pay, for past success they're paying him. And at 36, he did have 76 receptions, 851 yards, 5 TDs, but it was just like you could see he was just not the same player down the stretch. But we'll see how KC does. I think they are getting excited there. 6 wins last year. I think they jumped back into the playoff picture. But what do I know? Nate says I am a Patrick Mahomes apologist and a Chiefs fan. But, another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. Appreciate Angel behind the glass. Did a great job. Kevin, anything before we get out of here? What do you got for us?
I don't know. I'm going to get a blanket for next week because it's starting to get drafty in here. We're getting close to the draft. We're going to have to start there and start breaking some stuff down soon.
Kevin went a little funny before we get out of here. We're definitely going to start talking about mock drafts. As I said, the draft will be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, April 23rd to the 25th. And we'll start, the biggest crapshoot there ever is, so we'll see how it goes. And we'll much to talk about here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.